In a small village where everyone knew each other, a lonely girl named Elena lived in a house on the edge of a dense forest, where the wind howled like it mourned something lost. She loved the quiet, but one evening, as the moon barely pierced the clouds, she heard a sound, like nails scraping her windowpane. Elena approached, her breath fogging the cold glass, but outside was only darkness. She shut the curtains, a chill creeping down her spine. The next night, the sound returned, now joined by a whisper, soft, raspy. "Elena! I see you." Her heart raced, but she told herself it was her imagination. Yet the whisper didn't stop. It grew louder each night, seeping through the walls as if someone stood just beyond them. One night she woke to 3 slow, heavy knocks on her door. Holding her breath, she didn't dare approach, but in the morning, a note lay on her doorstep, scrawled in red ink. "You can't hide." Days became hell. Her phone started ringing from an unknown number. Silence at first, then the same raspy voice repeating her name, savoring it. Elena noticed things vanishing, a comb, a mug, then one day her favorite dress, left on a chair. Returning home once, she found all her wall photos turned face down, and on the table sat her childhood picture, its eyes cut out. Then came the letters, dozens of paper scraps, covered in jagged handwriting. "You drank tea at 6:43 p.m. You look so pretty in your blue pajamas. I heard you cry last night." Elena called the police, but they found no traces, no fingerprints, no witnesses. Her dog, an old mutt named Rex, began howling nightly, staring into the darkness outside, until one morning she found him dead in the yard. No wounds, just eyes wide with terror. The worst came on a rainy night when the power cut out. Elena sat in darkness when she heard footsteps in the attic, slow, heavy, as if someone dragged their feet across the wooden floor. She grabbed a knife and locked herself in her bedroom, her hands shaking so hard the blade nearly slipped. The footsteps descended the stairs, stopping outside her door. Silence tore at her ears, but then the lock clicked, and the door creaked open. In her flashlight's beam, she saw a silhouette, tall, gaunt, with bony arms dangling to its knees. Its face hid in shadow, but she felt its gaze, cold, piercing. Elena screamed, and it vanished, dissolving into the air. The police found nothing again, but the next day, a note lay on her bed. "You're mine." After moving to the city, she thought the nightmare was over, but every night, drifting to sleep, she heard the whisper. "Elena, I'm still here." One morning, she woke to a handprint on her fogged window, from the inside. Marta lived in an old apartment in the city center. The building was run down, with peeling walls and creaking floors, but she'd grown used to it. One day, she noticed her bathroom mirror acting strange. Her reflection seemed to lag a split second behind her movements. She blamed fatigue, but soon shadows appeared in the glass, dark, blurry figures behind her when the room was empty. One night, she woke feeling watched. Flipping on the light, she glanced in the mirror and froze. Huge, unblinking eyes stared back, drilling into her. They vanished when she screamed, but their gaze lingered in her mind, etched deep. Soon, marks appeared on her apartment walls, tiny crosses scratched with something sharp, like a knife. Her dog Bim, who slept by her bed, started barking at empty corners, once howling so fiercely Marta's blood ran cold before he hid under the couch. She set up a camera to catch what happened at night. Watching the footage, she saw a silhouette, tall, hunched, standing over her bed, its dark face inches from hers as she slept. The camera didn't show it entering or leaving. The next day, she found an envelope under her door, her photo, asleep, with a hand hovering above her, holding a knife. Panic became unbearable when Marta returned home one day to find every mirror shattered, the shards arranged into words on the floor. "I see everything." That night she heard tapping on her window, slow, rhythmic, like fingers drumming. Living on the 5th floor, she dreaded looking, but when she did, a pale face pressed against the glass, unblinking eyes, mouth stretched in an unnatural grin. It tapped once more and vanished. Marta fled the apartment, but in her new home, the nightmare persisted. One evening, washing dishes, she glimpsed those eyes in the pot's reflection, right behind her. Turning, she found nothing, but the hallway mirror cracked on its own. Andrei took a job as a night guard at an old warehouse outside town. The place was remote, surrounded by empty fields and a forest where the wind howled at night and trucks rumbled by day, delivering goods. The work was simple: sit in a small booth with a few monitors, check the cameras, and occasionally patrol with a flashlight. The first weeks were calm: silence, the creak of wooden racks, and the dim glow of lamps. But one night, at 2:58 a.m., the work phone rang. Andrei picked up, expecting a dispatcher or driver, but heard only noise, low humming, like someone breathing into the receiver. "Hello?" he said, but there was no reply. Seconds later, the noise broke into a voice, slow, deep, as if from the bottom of a well. "Are you alone?" Andrei laughed, thinking it was a prank from a late-night driver, and hung up. But at exactly 3 o'clock, it rang again. The same voice, the same whisper. "Are you alone?" This time, its tone held something cold, something that made the skin on Andrei's neck prickle. He checked the cameras. Long warehouse corridors lined with crates, all empty. Outside, near the gate, a lone branch swayed in the spotlight's beam, but no one was in sight. The phone fell silent, but an hour later, it rang again. "I know where you sit," the voice whispered, and this time Andrei caught a faint chuckle, as if it mocked his fear. He ran outside, circling the warehouse with his flashlight, but found only the cold wind and darkness. Back in the booth, he noticed his chair was slightly turned, though he was sure he'd left it straight. That night he didn't sleep, staring at the monitors, but the calls kept coming, every time at 3 o'clock, each with a new phrase. "I see your desk. You grip that flashlight so tight." In the morning, as his shift ended, Andrei found a scrap of paper under the booth's door, scrawled in jagged handwriting. "Sleep well." His hands shook as he realized someone had been close, too close. The next nights only heightened his dread. The phone rang like clockwork, and the voice grew more menacing. Once it said, "You didn't hear me come in." And at that moment, the booth's lights flickered, as if someone brushed the wires. Andrei started checking the warehouse door locks, but they were always intact, though he heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, like someone pacing between the racks. The cameras showed nothing, but one night, as he sipped coffee to stay awake, the phone rang off schedule, at 4:17. "Look at your cup," the voice hissed. Andrei glanced down, and saw his fresh coffee covered in a thin film of dust, as if it had sat there for weeks. He threw the cup to the floor, and in that instant, laughter erupted, shrill, inhuman, echoing through the empty warehouse. After that, Andrei started carrying a knife, an old, dull one, but it eased his nerves a little. He asked his boss to check the phone line, but the man just shrugged. "It's an old system, probably shorting out." Yet the calls didn't stop, and each night, the voice grew more familiar with his life. "You bought bread yesterday at the shop by the bridge," it said once, and Andrei froze. It was true. "You breathe so loud when you sleep," it added another night, though he never dozed off at work. He began to feel watched, not just at the warehouse but beyond it. One evening, walking home, he spotted a shadow around a street corner, tall, hunched, standing still under a lamppost. As he approached, it vanished, but a wet footprint remained on the pavement, as if someone had stood there barefoot. Strange things started happening at the warehouse. The lights flickered for no reason, and once they cut out entirely, leaving him in darkness for minutes. He heard something heavy crash in the far corner, a loud thud, like a crate falling from a rack. Checking it, he found a broken box, and inside was his own jacket, the one he'd lost a week earlier. Pinned to it was a note. "You smell like fear." Andrei rushed to the cameras, but the footage showed nothing, no movement, no silhouette. That night the phone rang again. "You shouldn't have looked for it," the voice hissed, and the monitor he was watching rippled, as if someone dragged a finger across the screen from inside. The worst came when he found a photo on his desk. It was him, sitting in the booth, clutching his knife, with a blurry shadow standing behind him. It had been taken that night, but he'd heard no sound, no rustle. His heart pounded as he realized someone had been in the booth with him. He began searching every corner, every nook of the warehouse, but found only emptiness. Yet one time, returning from a patrol, he saw his chair now face the wall, a cross scratched into its back. The phone rang, and the voice said, "You can't find me, but I'm already here." Andre felt a cold breath on his neck, though the room was empty. He spun around, nothing, but a mirror on the wall, one he'd never noticed before, showed eyes, bulging, unblinking, watching him from the reflection. Andre couldn't take it anymore. He decided to quit, but his final shift became the climax of his nightmare. That night, the wind howled louder than ever, and the warehouse felt alive, racks creaking as if someone walked among them, distant thuds of falling objects blending into an eerie rhythm. The phone rang at 3 o'clock, as always, but this time the voice felt closer, like a whisper in his ear. "Look behind you." Andre whipped around and saw a face in the booth's window, pale, twisted, with bulging eyes and a wide grin bearing sharp teeth. It didn't move, just stared, but when he blinked, it was gone. His hand shook as he grabbed his knife and ran for the door, but it was locked from the inside, though the key was in his pocket. The phone kept ringing, the voice screaming, "You won't get out!" Andre pounded the door until he smashed the glass with his fist, blood dripping down his arm. He stumbled outside but froze. Every spotlight around the warehouse was off, and in the darkness between the trees stood a silhouette, tall, hunched, with arms hanging unnaturally low. It slowly raised its head, and Andre saw eyes, the same ones from the mirror, now glowing with a dim, dead light. He ran for the road, not looking back, until he reached town. His shift ended, and he never returned to the warehouse. But the nightmare didn't end. At home, the phone rang in the dead of night, the same voice, the same whisper. "Are you alone?" Andre threw it out, but the calls continued, first from the kitchen, where an old radio crackled, then from the TV he hadn't turned on. One night, he woke to a sound, nails scratching at his bedroom door. He grabbed his knife and flung the door open, but the hall was empty. Yet on the floor lay another photo, him asleep in bed, a shadow looming over him, mouth open as if about to scream. Since then, Andre doesn't sleep without a light, but every night he hears footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming closer. One morning, he woke to find his knife, left on the table, stabbed into his door, from the inside.